Alright guys, so today we will choose what is the hardest and what is the easiest style for your video game. It's a hard question to ask yourself when you are building your new video game, choosing the art style to fit your narrative design the best and to fit your marketing strategy. Because of course, if we looked more into it, for example, gacha games goes very well with anime style video games more than like hyper-realistic like Battlefield style of a video game or code or stuff like that. Like hyper-realistic styles does not go very well with gacha games, for example. So choosing your art style is very good thing for marketing and the narrative design that you are going through. So starting with this is mid-poly. Mid-poly is the thing that is between low poly and high poly or very hyper-realistic like graphics for your game. So mid-poly is usually used for either stylized video games or if you want to use an engine like Godot or maybe Unity and you don't want really to burn the if you do not have the best optimization method, so you want to make something in between. The problem with mid-poly is the topology is very hard to make because in a very big AAA game, one character could take up 600,000 triangles and it's okay with the LOD 0, for example, but in mid-poly you need to really make a very good topology, so the textures look good, the character look good and look highly in detailed, yet it's not very it does not contain a lot of polygons. So I would say making a full video game of mid-poly could be a very hard task to do, because by the way, topology is one of the hardest thing to do in the 3D industry, especially because if you are making a mid-poly, usually people go with first-person shooters or a 3D over-the-shoulder camera, which means that you will need a lot of 3D assets, and controlling the poly count in such a matter for such a video game could go very complicated. Like, see, Overwatch is a stylized mid to high poly video game, and it's very hard to manage making 3D assets for a game just like Overwatch. So yet it's not very known genre for an art. A 3D mid-poly is very hard to manage. Low poly stylized, so this is not just low poly, this is a stylized low poly. This could go for a moderately hard. Yes, it's very hard to like control the color scheme or to show details on characters, but low poly is one of the most used ND art styles in the video game industry, and that's because it's very easy to manage and not showing much of details is just like pixel art, yet it needs to be controlled or have some type of control. Some errors could be manageable more than hyper-realistic graphics or other type of art. So it's actually very good beginner friendly stuff, but we are not going to manageable or beginner friendly because stylized have a problem of the color scheme, and because it's being stylized need a different approach from normal low poly. So it could be either moderately hard or manageable. I think in my opinion it would be moderately hard, because this gonna be usually be done in indie studios or indie teams, and indie studios will have difficulties more than AA to AAA studios, just like the mid-poly or high poly usually is used. So this is why I would rank it moderately hard, because it's in comparison for an indie team. Hyper-realistic, definitely brutal. Even with the new tools that are found in Unreal Engine, we saw Expedition 33 and multiple titles that could go with a very nice, very amazing graphics using Unreal Engine, MetaHuman, and the Quixel or database that they have on Fab, and different art styles. Putting a cube in Unreal Engine, it would look way better than putting it in Unity. So achieving good graphics in Unreal is now easier than before, but the problem is the customization and the amount of hyper-realistic graphics, hyper-realistic graphics, because this is hyper-realistic. We're not talking about only high poly, we're talking hyper-realistic graphics could take 100 of artists, 100 of art directors, because people working in art, I'm sorry, because you will need art directors, lighting directors, people that handles UV, texturing, modeling, animation. So it's one of the most hard genres out there, and especially used, to be honest, in only AA to AAA title industries. It's not very familiar in the indie industry. Like small teams, only Expedition 33 and some video games, because of the new Unreal Engine updates, are now switching to hyper-realistic to or a high poly, which is, by the way, high poly and hyper-realistic goes both in the brutal. It's very hard to manage, it's very hard to do, because many people, it's not just about making the art, sometimes it's about optimization. You would need to do a very good optimization to handle such graphics. You need to limit the size of the textures so your game does not be a fucking 500 gigabyte to download. So it needs AAA tools to handle AAA graphics. So it's very complicated and hard for indie studios to do, and definitely nearly impossible for a solo dev to do without using really large assets from Fab, and it's just gonna look like an asset flip, unfortunately. Low poly, one of the best beginner friendly indie used art styles out there. I highly recommend using low poly for your video game. It could give you this very nice cartoonish style, which is very charming, very amazing. If you did a very nice post-processing effects on this, you could achieve one of the best art styles. Like, look at the assets from Poly Heaven in I guess they were named like Poly Heaven. I don't, or Poly Scientix. I don't really remember the name in the Unity asset store. They are very familiar of making low poly assets. They are amazing and putting a nice post-processing effects and very choosing to do a different unique style with the shaders for low poly could achieve a very amazing art style. And to be honest, I've seen some very beautiful low poly video games, and it's very easy to set up. It does not take a lot of time as high poly or mid poly or even mid poly stylized. So highly recommend low poly style for small teams or solo devs, or people who want to make who don't want to focus on the art as much as the systems that are coded in the video game. Because again, 70% of your video game gonna go to art, and we're talking here 3D assets handling, art direction in general for the art, and different stuff going on to music even goes with the art thing I'm talking here about. So 70% go to the art, and only 30% goes to everything else like coding, etc. Especially for, and this is for most of it's just like something to use. It's not really a 100% accurate percentage. It's just something to put in matter that art takes a lot of more time than just coding in most genres. So yeah, definitely I would recommend low poly. Here we have high poly stylized. High poly stylized would go of one of the very hardest thing to do, especially for indie studios or small teams, because it's actually, in my opinion, hardest than the mid poly stylized or the mid poly itself. And the reason is, it's not about just managing poly count anymore. It's now about trying to make it look good in a very limited color scheme and in a very limited going out from the character sheet itself. For example, if you are designing a character, you're gonna get a 2D character drawing, and you're gonna need to convert it to 3D, and you cannot, in like when you are sketching a human, give it to the 3D designer. He can go and make different features in the face and make adjustments. Here, no, it's very strict. You need to make every detail just like the drawing. So you need to draw stuff, every prop, every character, and then go and do it in 3D. Texturing is very more tricky. Handling it in the engine is more tricky. It's very complicated and needs a lot of things to do. I would recommend for indie studios and solo devs and small teams to neglect this art style in general, especially because it does not, like, yeah, it looks good, but it does not actually equal the effort that you go and put it into it. This is 3D anime style, so this could go in the very hard to moderately hard. I would put it in very hard, because actually making a very good shader for a 3D anime style is hard, and making the art is actually just as hard as mid poly or high poly stylized. And this depend on your scale of your video game. So some video games have low scale, so it could go low to a moderately hard, but most anime style video games are very high in content. Like, look at Genshin Impact, for example. Most of gacha games and most of the video games that have 3D anime style has a lot of content. If you have less gameplay time, of course they could go something lower, but we're talking on the most famous stuff that's been related to this art style. So it's usually very hard to manage, especially for large amount of props and large amount of characters, so it gets really messy. Shading could get really a very fucking big headache for optimization. So 3D anime style is one of the hardest thing to do in the gaming industry. Yes, it's not like high poly and HyperRealistic, which just is brutal and very limited to AAA industries, but it's a very hard thing to manage. But here is the catch: it's very marketable. Anime, very good gameplay games gets tons of downloads, and they accept, most people like gacha games and stuff accept microtransactions, yet I disagree with microtransactions at all, but you can't do that in a marketing perspective. And they have a community. Making a cute anime girl, well, many people will just download the game just because there are cute girls in the game, which suck. For me, I see it as an unreasonable thing, but in marketing perspective, again, it's something to consider for yourself. 2D anime style. This will shock many people, but it's a brutal thing to do. That's the reason why anime studios take a lot of time to produce even limited episodes, like 12 episodes. They take 6 months, 5 months. I've worked in the anime industry, so I understand how it's hard to make anime style. So making 2D anime animation is actually harder than make 3D anime. It's very complicated, takes a lot of time. You would need a separate studio or department in your studio just for the art, because of how complicated making a 2D an anime game is. So it's very, very complicated, and definitely never recommended for both AAA, AA, and indie studio. It's one of the hardest thing to actually achieve, especially for big content games. So I would tell you this from now: you saw a game that used 2D anime style, you run in the opposite direction as fast as you can. It's just like a white bear, a polar bear who wants to rip you apart. It's very hard. You should not do this. 2.5D. See, this sometimes goes to moderately hard, but I would say it's manageable. 2.5D is one of the most neglected art style direction in the industry right now, but it's very nice. It gives a very nice illusion for the player. It's very nice to look at. It's unique because it's not as used as other genres, just like mid-poly or mid-poly stylized. So it's gonna pop up in the Steam library if you did a very nice art style on the game, and actually it's not as hard as many people think, because if you managed and of course we're talking about a team, not a solo dev. A solo dev, it would goes instantly for either moderately hard or very hard thing to do. But for a small team, if you did some tweaking, it's not very hard on the optimization actually. So you could go around some stuff, just like the The animations are not a lot, by the way, because most of the 2.5D goes in like this perspective, just like 2D games, so they are actually not that hard to make. We have low poly. So low poly stylized, I would say it's just as manageable as the 2.5D, or sometimes beginner friendly. 3D low poly video games stylized, not like the normal low poly, is a very nice thing to do, a tweak on a low poly. I forgot to add the image, but pixel art and the normal 2D cartoonish style. Pixel art would go to manageable to beginner friendly. Of course, most of indie titles are pixel art. 3D pixel art is actually a shader, so we cannot like put it here. It's a shader, not a thing to do, not actually managing assets. PXR games and stuff like that could go also for manageable or moderately hard, depending on the content you are making. But for pixel art, it's beginner friendly. Most of video games use pixel art style. For cartoonish art style, it could go, if you are making like a style like a guacamole, you could go to very hard, and if you went too crazy, you could go brutal, just like anime style, because the same problems going with the anime style with the video game industry. So it's depending on how complicated you want the animations. Are you gonna use skeletal animation? Hand drawn animation definitely goes to brutal almost in every case scenario. Only like pixel art and some definite art styles. Most hard drawn animations for cartoon or anime just go for brutal, totally, like in a very easy way. So this is something to consider. Definitely ask me any question, just like the last episode, in the comments. I would answer all the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope I gave you even one informative information. So really thank you for watching the video to the end, and see you in the next episode.